Surprise! Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cover Crimson with Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. We're going to talk transfer portal on this pop-up show. If you're live with us right now, comment section, you can talk. But if not, hey, we still read all the comments. Roll Tide, though, man. Thank you. We got a lot to talk about. Bama losing some players, picking up some players, some sneaky players coming to town, some other guys that are on the radar. All that right here after this. All right, with Clint Lamb, I'm Mick Gillispie, off and running on a Monday. What's up, dude? How was your weekend?
It was good, man. Wasn't as eventful as probably I thought that it would be, or a lot of other Alabama fans were hoping that it would be. But still, watching Alabama get a good win over Creighton, watching some NFL football, Army Navy game on Saturday. That's always great. So it was a good time, but a lot left as far as what Alabama needs to do from a roster standpoint and things like that. So I guess that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, I would tell you guys about the floor Bama this weekend with the next round gang, but we got to talk some football first. Maybe at the end of the show if you're all good. Okay, so Devontae Smith getting in the portal is not a good look for Alabama. I mean, you talk about a guy who started 11 to 12 games who I thought was a really good player. What's going on? I mean, like, why is he going, and how are we going to replace this guy?
That's a good question. For him, you would think from an NFL perspective, I think he's a good player. I think he could end up playing in the league, but is he ever going to be a guy who gets that massive paycheck? Probably not. When you're guys like that on the college level, you could get a pretty hefty payday. So, is it him trying to go make himself a little bit more money before, he makes it to the NFL, and you never know how your career is going to turn around on that level? Is it, how things were? I don't think it was a playing time related situation. I mean, he was kind of a guy who was relied on when he was healthy, which he struggled to stay healthy. But, I think a lot of factors are playing into it. But, when you look at the guys who are going to be coming back, Red Morgan, I know a lot of people have been disappointed in his freshman performance. First of all, he's young. Second of all, he's a little bit undersized. And so you give him a year, a full off season in the strength and conditioning program, I think he'll be better off next year. You give him another off season of development as far as understanding the scheme, understanding, his role within the scheme. I think, he'll grow from that standpoint too. So I fully expect him to be a much better player in 2025, even though I think he's shown some flashes in 2024. I don't think it's I don't think anybody's questioning the fact that he has had some, up and down play, but he's a first-year player. We've seen it from other defensive backs who have been first-year contributors in the past. They've grown in year two as a contributor or as a starter, and so I would expect that from Red Morgan. And then you also got Deshaun Jones, and we don't know what's going to happen with Damani Jackson, but we know Alabama's recruited the perimeter cornerback position extremely well over the last two cycles. Xavier Brown got experience. Jaylen Mbakwe's got experience. You got Dijon Lee coming in. You got Chuck McDonald. You've got some good players, in that outside perimeter cornerback room. So then you start asking yourself, okay, are they going to be looking for more experience on the outside? Does Deshaun Jones play into that? Or in Devontae Smith's absence and the fact that you've also been missing at times Red Morgan, but also the fact that he's had that up and down play. Deshaun Jones has played some Husky this year, and I think he's been pretty good. He's been almost as physical as Devontae Smith, which was a huge surprise to me, but also he's got perimeter corner cover skills. And so I think maybe he offers something a little bit different at that Husky position if he ends up being the starter or a contributor there, rotation, whatever it looks like. So, and there are other players too. I mean, Dijon Lee can play probably some Husky. King Mack has played it a little bit. I think his size, offenses will take advantage of that. If he's playing that too much, you got a bunch of other players who could play it. But it's a disappointing development as far as Devontae Smith. I think probably he's the most shocking of the guys who have entered, according to the coaching staff. But at the same time, I don't think it's a situation where he's like a player where they can overcome that.
Yeah, I think with Justice Haynes, I've read a lot of comments that you guys have had, and you feel like Alabama contributed to this, not you, Clint, but them, by not giving the ball to him enough, and finally ran the ball against Auburn. But where the hell's that been all season? I love watching Milroe run, but not as your primary running back. You got these guys like Justice Haynes, who I think could do a better job of reading blocks and hitting holes, but still, the guy's he's got all the tools to be an amazing player. 6 carries isn't getting it done. I'm sure his family and him were like, we got to go somewhere else where they're going to give him the ball. Jam Miller had that 28 carry Iron Bowl, which will make you stick around. You got to figure too next year without Milroe. And yeah, guys, I'm telling you, Milroe's not coming back. Take my word for it. You'll have a more conventional style of, either we're going to hand the ball off or throw it, and maybe, quarterback scrambles every once in a while, but I don't think there's going to be too many design runs with Ty Simpson. So I could see him leaving. You also got Richard Young and other running backs. I don't see that one being as painful. The 3 wide receivers that left, Odom, I got to bet he was leaving when he was like retweeting stuff. And then, they threw him the ball and, it just wasn't really that great at catching it. And then Prentice and Law, overhyped, underdelivered to me. So you could go out there and bring some other guys in. And we had some wide receivers in town, by the way, and I'd love to ask you about them. But this Devontae Smith one was one where I was like, oh, like this hurt. They're already a position of weakness. And I just wonder, is this guy getting the portal and he wants more money, or, we're just not real happy with the system, or whatever. But I thought he had a really good year. And, I hate to see this, but this is what college football is. And we can either embrace it, or be the old man standing on the, get off my lawn guy. That's the way it is right now.
I mean, yeah, and you got to be able to battle. And I don't think people understand fully what Alabama's, Kalen DeBoer and company's purpose is in the transfer portal. Let's be honest. The Texas types of schools, they're going to spend an absurd amount of money in the transfer portal. They're going to spend an absurd amount of money as far as high school recruiting. And then you got places, like Alabama. Ole Miss would kind of be the opposite, where they're, putting more of their focus on the transfer portal. Alabama and Kalen DeBoer have seemed to put a lot of emphasis on the high school recruiting side of it. But, when you look at DeBoer and what he's done, I mean, you look at some of the guys that he brought in to Washington as transfer portal players, like Michael Penix Jr. I think he was number 79 overall, QB 12, according to On3. When he was in the transfer portal. But then you look at like Dylan Johnson, wasn't a highly ranked guy. You had Jeremy Bernard when they brought him over from Michigan State, a lot less known than he was when he followed DeBoer to Alabama. You look at Josh Cuevas from Cal Poly. That was a guy who really no one had heard of. And then, Jabbar Muhammad, he was at Oklahoma State, was not a super highly regarded corner. And then he played for a year at Washington. And then, of course, he ended up going to Oregon. And he was very highly sought after his time at Oregon, after his time at Washington. So
trying to get him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Alabama, a lot of people were interested. So my point is that this coaching staff is really good at evaluating. They don't have to have the top guys and spending an absurd amount of money in the transfer portal. They believe in their ability to evaluate, especially talent on the lower levels of college football. Maybe some hidden gems and things like that. Like Josh Cuevas, when he got to Washington, he didn't have a massive role during his time there. He also didn't have a massive role necessarily this year for Alabama, but he's going to have a much bigger role in 2025, or that's what we're expecting. And so, that was a guy who took a couple of years of playing and kind of being a role player. Now he's probably going to be a much bigger piece of the offense. But you start looking at some of these guys that Alabama's considering bringing in. Kevin Concepcion, we've talked about him, incredible talent. Luke has, that's another one. Bama fans would have loved to have had him, but I think the approach right now with the transfer portal is value. And because of their ability to, see some of these players and understand what they're going to be getting with them, I think they can go out there and you'll see and hear some names that maybe you don't recognize, that maybe you think, what are we doing? Why are we going after this guy? And it's like, you don't understand Cody Hardy is one of them, and we'll talk about him here in just a second. But there's a few names on this list that I've been looking at and really diving into the film, and I've been extremely impressed, Mick.
Well, I can tell you this from being around baseball for a long time, just because you have, a high status as far as like prospect goes, doesn't mean that you're going to go out there and play. So, I mean, I totally get that if you were great at evaluating talent, that you don't have to have all the accolades that you had in high school. These guys, and look, you can look at Indiana and realize, I mean, they're the best example of it. I mean, you can find great players at the lower levels of football. You just got to pick the right ones. And, maybe those guys were overlooked because, somewhere along the line, maybe their size isn't right. Maybe they don't like something about them. They didn't come from a, big school or didn't have any hype. But the other side of this too is the success rate on those guys with 5 stars next to their names is a lot higher than the guys with 3 stars next to their names. And so that the talent part of it, the natural talent part, is really important. The problem that I'm sure DeBoer has, which Saban didn't have, is, Saban was able to basically get those 5-star guys to play like they were 2-star guys, meaning that he's going to ride your ass. Okay. It doesn't matter what you come in and how hyped you are or whatever. You're going to do things the way he wants to do it, or you're not going to be here. And those guys need that. All of the lessons that he taught, it really resonated with those premier players because they knew that they didn't have the room to play the star thing, like he didn't care. DeBoer's personality is probably closer to mine. To be honest, I mean, like you're going to go and have a good time every day. You're going to expect those guys to be as much of a driving force for their success as for the team's success. Everybody's personality is different. And so I wonder if that's a challenge for him moving forward with some of these guys, because you've got to have that premier talent, even if you do find some diamonds in the rough out there, and I just worry, maybe I shouldn't say worry, but I wonder, how that's going to work because, seeing like a 5-star guy like Justice Haynes, just walk away, that tells me something and it tells me something I really didn't want to hear, Clint.
Well, I mean, the problem with everything is that we're living in a world where there's so many new factors involved in college football that make a difference. It's not just playing time. It's not just location, money's involved. Obviously that is a huge driving force for most everyone. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but I think everybody in life really want to be successful financially. And so that's going to play a part in all of this. But I like I said, when you look at like Kevin Concepcion, that's a player we'll start with, the offensive lineman from Arkansas who was supposed to come on a visit, Patrick Cooties, I think. He ended up committing to Ole Miss. He didn't take his visit to Alabama. Alabama never even offered the guy. You look at Luke Haas, that is a player who, if I'm not mistaken, he did have an Alabama offer, but Alabama really wasn't pushing for him like a lot of people think that they are or were before he committed to Ole Miss. Then you look at Kevin Concepcion. They get him on campus. They love the potential role and fit that he could have within the offense, but I don't think right now Alabama is making any sort of major push to sign players. They want to get a feel for some of these guys, how they might fit. What's their thought process? Is it all about NIL money? If you're a guy like Kevin Concepcion, you go certain places and you'll end up being the featured piece of the offense, the main receiver. That's not happening in Tuscaloosa. Ron Williams is still going to be there. Jeremy Bernard is probably going to be coming back as well. So you look at like their receiving room, and it's like, okay, you'll have a big role. You're going to get targets. You're going to add an element to the offense that I think really could help you and provide value for you, but also provide value for us. But some guys, it really goes beyond that. They want, whether it be NIL, whether it be they want the numbers as far as for the next level. They want to be able to get the stats and the targets and be the featured piece and all that stuff. So, it's like Alabama can't pitch some of these things. And I don't think that they really want to. They're looking for specific guys. They have specific things in mind within this Kalen DeBoer offense. And I'm talking more so offense than defense right now, that they want to fill voids. And it's not about, getting the big star player. It is about understanding value of guys, what you're going to be asking them to do. How much should you be paying for certain guys based off of what you're going to be asking them to do? Like if if they were looking more so for that to be more of a complementary piece to the wide receivers, and then you're talking about maybe he's not going to have a massive role in the passing game, even though he would have a role. Absolutely, he's a good pass catcher, would certainly provide an upgrade there compared to what they had this year. And we've talked about that. But if you're not planning to have him as a featured piece, okay, I mean, what's the point in paying him a lot of money? Like, you sure, that having that guy would be great. Having an excellent wide receiver 3 would be phenomenal. But, it's more of the role that they were going to be providing Alabama. And what's that worth to the coaching staff? I think that's, playing a much bigger factor in this than people realize.
Yeah, and I was going to hit wide receivers, so I'm glad you talked about Concepcion. What about Mario Carver? Had a Bama offer before he went to Mississippi State. He had like 27 or 30 offers or something. I mean, like, this was a guy who was pretty highly sought after, former 4-star. Went to Clay Chalkville, right? Or Hewitt Trust.
No. Yeah, Clay Chalkville. He was teammates with Jaylen Milroe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he's made a visit. It had a successful first year, but speed, a little bit of burst with this guy could be a good piece for Alabama. And I'm sure he grew up an Alabama fan. I mean, most of them did.
Well, I mean, true freshman. Alabama was on his short list. Obviously, he's teammates with Jaylen Milroe. 5'10", 170 pounds, 17 catches, 368 yards. He averaged over 21 yards per catch, 3 touchdowns, only had 35 targets though. And so I think that, he was only a true freshman at the same time. Like, you look at, Eastern Kentucky against Toledo, against Florida, Texas, Georgia. He had a 54-yard catch, a 45-yard catch, a 37-yard catch. I think a 46 against Texas. He had a 72-yard catch against Georgia. Predominantly, a lot of people coming out of high school thought he would be more of a slot guy. Very great as far as the short area quickness. Really good as far as getting in and out of his breaks. I think he can be utilized more underneath than we saw this year at Mississippi State. But what he really grew into for them, playing mostly outside, didn't really play in the slot like they were projecting. He was a big play guy, won a lot downfield. You talk about Kalen DeBoer's offense and what it wants to do as far as stretching you vertically. This guy would provide that. But I think as far as what he can provide on the, shorter, really the stuff behind the line of scrimmage, the 1 to 9 yard range. I mean, when you start talking about 10 plus, I mean 90+% of his receiving yards this year came from 10 plus yards. So he was not really used as a short option too much. I think he can continue to grow and become that short, route runner, precise route runner, where he can do a lot more as far as the underneath stuff, but also brings that vertical element. I think he would be a phenomenal fit. And that's a guy who's not getting the same attention as some of these other receivers. And he's got that Alabama connection. He's an in-state guy. We talk about how important in-state players are to Alabama. That would certainly, reunite him and Jaylen Milroe. So he would be a perfect fit based off of kind of what he provides, what Alabama would be looking for. And he probably would be okay only being a true sophomore with playing more of a complementary secondary role in the passing game compared to maybe guys like Ryan Williams, with the understanding that in the future, maybe when Jeremy Bernard leaves after 2025, if that's how it ends up playing out, he can end up having a much bigger role. But, guys like Kevin Concepcion, that's a guy who has done the college thing for 2 years. He's going to be draft eligible after next year. He wants to make more of an immediate impact, to be more of a featured piece. And so I think when you start looking at it, a guy like Mario Craver, that would be a much more, in my opinion, realistic option for Alabama based off of kind of where those guys are at in their careers.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll see what happens. Going to be, 3 spots available. Going to be interesting to see kind of who ends up popping in there. And you have 20 days to basically make yourself available to the transfer portal, but you got all the time you want to sign, right?
Yes. Now repeat that one more time.
You got 20 days. The portal's open for 20 days, but just because you declare that you're going to be you still got however, it's not like you have to sign within 20 days. You just
correct.
Go out there and check out, hey, I'm in the portal here, guys, come pay me.
You got 20 days to get in the portal. You don't have 20 days to find a new home. And some of these guys, they probably will wait. I think everybody, if they can, or most people, are going to be looking at, okay, I want to get somewhere before the spring. That would certainly give me a leg up as far as getting involved on either side of the football, growing or building those relationships with teammates, new teammates, getting used to a new location as far as, school and all those things. So, yeah, I think it would be, I think the priority for a lot of guys is to get somewhere as soon as possible, but I don't think that'll necessarily be the case for everybody. And there will be a second transfer portal window. And last year, Kalen DeBoer and company did a pretty good job of identifying some guys, Keon Sabb, Deshaun Jones, where they got some pretty good players at that point. Once again, Keon Sabb's one of those that's like, okay, this guy, everybody knew this guy was really good. It really wasn't that hard of an evaluation for the coaching staff or for fans to make that connection. But then you're going out and you're getting a guy like Deshaun Jones, who ended up being a pretty valuable depth piece and provided some versatility in the secondary. And I fully would expect that to continue in that second transfer portal window based off of, you evaluate your own roster. You also know who's going to be coming in the summer. You wonder, okay, how much can these guys contribute when they get here? If not, you can fill some last minute needs before you get into the summer. So this is a process. And I think that some programs are taking the approach of, we want to get the best players in here that we possibly can at the positions of need that we have. We give them some quick evaluations and we give them a lot of money. And you end up, that's great. Certain guys want that. They're not really interested in seeing campus too much, or they want to know playing time and money. And, people like Kalen DeBoer, Nick Saban was also this way. He was never one to rush. When you looked at what he did his last couple of years when the transfer portal became a thing, and then you look at Kalen DeBoer, the transfer portal would open up the last couple of years on like December 4th and December 5th. And they wouldn't really, neither program, Washington or Alabama, it was at least 10, 11 days before they were signing their first player out of the portal. And it's because they want to go through the process of really they want the fit. And it's not just, people think fit is only their physical talent and what it's going to do within your offense stuff. It's also getting to know a guy. It's trusting, who he is as a person and how he's going to handle. You don't want somebody that's going to show up and want to be a diva and say, hey, I don't care if Ryan Anderson's in this offense. I want to be the alpha number one, and I'm going to cause a big stink because I'm not that guy. Like, that's not a fit, because Ron Williams is going to be the alpha number one. So it's like a lot more, going into the process that people realize.
Guys, as you hang out with us here, like, subscribe, and thumbs up. Hit the bell so when we pull a little fast one on you like we did today with a live show, you'll know. You'll get a little notification. Hey, Clint's on. Better jump on the screen. Now, the other thing I want to do for all of you guys, this is much better than the Jelly of the Month Club that Clint and I got from the next round for Christmas. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't get that. Just kidding, guys. Just kidding. I know Dunaway made fun of me on his show last week, but we made up on Friday. Did you see us, Clint? We were on together Friday. I laughed about it. I want us to stay in the SEC, okay? I was just pissed off about not being in the college football playoff. Okay, sue me, okay? But I'm going to give you guys this. And you don't have to go kidnap Dunaway from his house and bring him to your Christmas party. 300% deposit bonus for the casino and 50 free spins using the code next round, or 50% sign-up bonus for the sports book. That's at mybookie.ag. Again, use that promo code next round. Take advantage of it as you're hanging out during the holidays, looking for something to do. I say this, and honestly, part of it is because it's true, and then part of it is because I love to talk about Big Sexy Elmo, the late great Big Sexy Elmo. But as I'm sitting here, he would always talk to me about the roulette game on places like mybookie.ag. He loved it. He would tell me how much money he was up, and I'd always say, cash out. I'm up $1,400. Cash out. but try it for yourself. 300% deposit bonus, 50 free spins using that promo code next round, guys. And that's our Christmas for you. So yeah, I was at the Floor Bama. Clint hung out with Lance and Ryan and Dunaway Friday. Had a blast. I was on their show. Even read the LT's trash. LT got trashed on Thursday, so he didn't want to read trash. So he answered to me. I wasn't smooth to start, but I felt like I finished really smoothly.
It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish.
Yeah, it's fun. It was fun being on there. And then Saturday we did the floor Bama. I mean, we did it up. And then Sunday I had a hangover. So then now today I'm like, this is like the day after the day. So I'm back to 100%. Look, guys, and we got on here at 8:30. So I mean, that shows you that that I'm recovered. But I had a blast hanging out with those guys. Really, really fun dudes. Like, and you know, I don't even know what you would call it. Like, is that our sister channel, or you know, we're under the same umbrella, kind of?
Yeah, we're under the Disrupt umbrella, and obviously the next round's their main brand.
Yeah,
we're kind of we would love to get to that point someday, and we certainly feel like with the people that we have who listen to our show every day, I mean, we're quickly getting there. We love what we're building, but we're not quite to the next round status yet.
Well, I told them, like, we were just talking after the show. I was like, hey, we would love you guys to be more involved over here, because you know they're Alabama guys. Like, you know, like I know they talk Auburn, but especially Dunaway. I mean, he's a huge Bama fan, and LT went to Bama, you know, so but they love to, you know, kind of hang out there. But guys, we want you to take advantage of this. CoverCrimson.com, sign up, free T-shirt with annual subscription. We got a lot of big things going, not just redesigning the site, but some surprises for the new year. 2025. 2025 may bring you some things that you're going, oh, I see what you guys are doing. Just saying. All right, Clint. Let's talk a little bit more transfer portal, but also some comments here. Mike G. I'm a Mike G too, really a Mick G. Newsflash: team looks different every year, and I put this one up here because I did a video on my channel about this, Clint. Love to hear your opinion. I think that if you don't embrace the transfer portal, you're gonna get left behind. And do I like it? No. Do I think it's fair? No. Do I want the players to hold the teams hostage? No, I don't. None of us want that. We don't want these guys to not have rules. There needs to be some kind of, you know, lane, but there's not. But Nate Oates has been a great example of how you deal with this. You know, like, it's like, instead of being upset about it, he loves it. Like, hey, you know what? You're not that good. I'll see you later. Don't like the way you acted this year. You're not coming back. You know, like, there's two ways of looking at this. To me, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about, you're going to have teams. People are going to have different approaches to the transfer portal. I think that's already been made evident. You know, like I said, places like Ole Miss, you know, Lane Kiffin, he's wanting to be competitive now. He wants as many high school guys as he can get, but the transfer portal is pretty easy from a recruiting standpoint. You throw a paycheck in front of them and you tell them what kind of playing time they're getting, and you've got a good shot at a lot of different guys. High school recruiting, you got to get to know families a little bit more. You got to walk into some living rooms, and they got to be able to trust you with their kids. You're talking more so about both short and long-term development. It's going to be a plan for both. NIL dollars certainly play into that as well. Not saying that they don't, but I think on the transfer portal level, where guys are really trying to, you know, get it right before they try to head off to the NFL, it's more their role and their money is much more on the forefront. And then you've got places, and I'm telling you, Nick Saban was this way. Now, granted, when there are certain talents that end up hitting the transfer portal, Jahmyr Gibbs was one of them a few years ago, where it's like, did Alabama really have to have another running back? I mean, they could use a guy with more experience. They didn't have a lot of experience that offseason. But, you know, a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, it's like he wasn't a necessity. But it's like, man, a guy like that enters the portal and you have a vision for how he can be used in your offense. You want to go get him. A guy like Caleb Downs, if you're Ohio State, did Ohio State have to have another safety? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know the ins and outs of their roster, but what I will say is anybody and everybody who can try to go get a Caleb Downs needs to go try to do it, because he's a transformative piece for a defense. And so there's going to be those types of players that enter, but then more so Nick Saban and Kalen DeBoer very much seems this way too. They're let's take a step back. Let's figure out what we need, what we want. And you know, they don't want to just be going and blowing a lot of money on guys, and then he ends up not being a fit. He ends up having a disappointing season. And so a guy like Cody Hardy, who is the Elon tight end, who's going to be coming in later this week for a visit at Alabama, 6'5", 271 pounds, massive player, when I went and looked at him, because, okay, they're bringing him in for a visit. So obviously there's some interest, and he's actually gotten a lot of offers, a lot of decent offers from a lot of different programs. It's like, okay, but he didn't have a lot of production. I think like 10 catches for 65 yards and 1 touchdown in his entire career. So you go and you watch, you're like, what are they seeing this guy? I'm telling you, they see something. A lot of these programs see something with this guy. I watched him against Duke. Duke ended up being a 9-3 football team this year. They were pretty damn good. And that defense was pretty good as well. Their best pass rusher, Wesley Williams, 7.5 or 8 sacks, one of the two, led their team in pressures. You saw a lot of situations where, Hardy was going against him one-on-one, whether it be in pass protection, whether it be, as a run blocker. And this guy gets after you, man. He plays like a 271-pound tight end, almost like a smaller tackle in a lot of ways, but the movement skills are incredible. And I think he's a much better pass catcher than a guy who only has 65 career yards in 3 years would indicate. I think that Elon offense, I mean, you saw a lot of breakdowns as far as pass protection. Quarterback didn't have an opportunity to get the football out much.
Right.
I think their passing game, they averaged 26.8 yards, or 26.8 pass attempts per game. That's the same as Alabama, and Alabama was ranked outside the top 100. So that Elon passing attack really wasn't consistent. It didn't feature a lot of pieces. Right. And so the tight ends weren't a massive part of that offense. So you didn't see a lot of targets. But when you watch this guy, inside zone, power, counter, getting this guy on the move, great in line. I mean, played over 80% of his snaps in line for Elon. But then also, you can play him off the line of scrimmage as an H-back. Really good working his way across the formation, really inserts himself on power and really can dig some guys out. And he's scrappy, he's physical. I loved watching this guy. And I've got a bunch of clips that I could show people that I'll probably end up posting to Twitter. But I see the vision with this guy. And so I'm wondering, okay, how did he end up at Elon? Why has he not been a bigger piece of the passing offense? And so people will look at surface stats and the fact that of the school that he's at, and they're like, what are they doing? Are they going bargain shopping? To me, it's more of, we can get what we're looking for. We're looking for an inline option at tight end, a primary blocking tight end to complement Josh Cuevas. This guy is not going to break the bank, more than likely. I'm sure you're going to have to pay him more than you think. He's going to, I mean, the pursuit from other schools and stuff, a lot of places want him. But, I mean, he could end up being a lot cheaper than a guy like Luke has. And he can end up doing exactly what you need him to do, which is the blocking side, but he can also be more of a complementary piece with his, if you started actually throwing him the football a little bit more than Elon did. So that's something to keep in mind. That's just an example. Very impressed with him. I was impressed with the Nebraska tight end too. Probably not as much as Hardy, even though I think they were actually pretty similar. But, it's pretty clear what Alabama wants out of that tight end position, and they're targeting guys right now who can fill that.
Great to hear from Uncle Charles. What's up in Birmingham, man? One of the best callers on the postgame show. And Clint, you think about that bean story a lot. He asked for the beans. And he went back and, Uncle Charles told us this. And they told him he couldn't have the beans. And then he just walked down the street. And he said, wait a second. And went back and hit him over the head and took all the beans. You remember that?
Yeah, it's a great. I don't know where he comes up with this stuff, but I love it.
You've been posting like callers on the. You needed to get that one over there. Yeah, look, we're disappointed that they didn't put Bama in. I was adamantly disappointed, to say the least, on that one, because I think Bama should have been in the playoff, but. All of you guys, appreciate all of you guys for hanging out with us on the, and getting in the comments. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. I'm going to roll through some of these comments, but Lance, thank you. Smooth, kind of one of our greats here. 12 to 15 players is definitely a lot easier to manage than 85. I totally agree with that on the transfer portal. But what I'm saying is that you don't have a choice. I mean, you have to deal with it. So you can either look at it like, I say this all the time. I mean, and this is, it's not like I made this up, but you put a glass on the table, is it half full or half empty, right? And the way that you look at it, and the reason why that's one of those things that you should think about is your mentality is going to determine the way that you see it, and the way that you see it's going to really I guess, reflect on the energy that you bring to it every day, right? So if you say, well, I'm disappointed because it's half full, or what about if you say, hey, you know what, it's half empty, but I'm fine. It's like Bama's just got to embrace it like Nate Oates has. And we've got to build the NIL, and maybe that's like small contributions from us, but big contributions from the friends that we have that have the cash that we don't have. At least maybe some of you guys do. Maybe some of you guys are billionaires. Well, if you are, hit that NIL. Trainwreck 70, thank you so much, man. And that's Dave Chappelle I loved the Chappelle show, still my favorite. But yeah, how about some thumbs up? Thank you, Trainwreck. All right, let's roll through these here. See, you guys are still talking about Milroe. I'm telling you guys, Milroe's going to the NFL. I mean, so if you're talking about Milroe, then don't waste your time, because I think he's played his last game will be his next game. Just kind of looking through here for a good question for you, Clint. And well, let me ask you this. I mean, I'll just talk Milroe for a second, because I see that's always a topic of conversation. I'm just going to tell you guys what I think, Clint. You kind of, just give your take. Milroe's not coming back. I think he's going to declare for the NFL draft. If he doesn't do that, I think he'll play quarterback somewhere else in college, but I don't think that that's going to be what happens. I think he's going to the NFL. But I can tell you that I'm pretty confident in saying that his last game will be the bowl game, the ReliaQuest Bowl.
I would agree with you. And I think there were limitations to Milroe. There have been limitations. I also think he's worked extremely hard to overcome as many of those limitations as possible. I think he's always, had a good attitude and a good approach. I think his teammates love him for a reason. If you wonder, the Draft Day, the movie, right? Quarterback, his teammates didn't attend his birthday party, and NFL teams are looking at that and they're like, that's a big red flag. I guarantee you, everybody in that locker room would be at Jaylen Milroe's birthday party. I mean, they love the guy, and I think we don't give that side of it enough credit. But I agree with you where it does feel like he's going to end up moving on after this season. Now, where does that include? I would assume the NFL, but it could be somewhere else. I mean, I just feel like from a fit schematically within Kalen DeBoer's offense, and we had these questions going into the season. And granted, you looked at Kalen DeBoer, you looked at some of the skill sets that he's kind of worked with at that position. It's like he's always done a pretty good job of building around his players. And I think over the course of the season, they did that to an extent. But I think that, what he really wants to do offensively, whether it be the passing game, whether it be featuring more of the running backs, like Dylan Johnson was the main running back at Washington. But and he got a pretty significant workload, enough where he was one of the better running backs in the country. But he was just one guy. They didn't really have a committee. So the Kalen DeBoer offense, and at least the way it operated in the Pac-12, there wasn't a whole lot of room for multiple runners with the way they like to throw the football around. Everybody questioned that coming into the SEC. Then you start talking about, well, you got Justice Haynes, you got Jaylen Milroe. We expect them to be two of the better running backs in college football. What does the offense need to look like to have those guys involved? And then you throw in a volume runner like Jaylen Milroe. And what I think we didn't see coming, because I was very vocal going into the season, having two running backs, possibly three, depending on what was going on with Richard Young and how they felt about him, that would be difficult to have three guys involved, maybe even having two consistently involved, if you had the volume in the passing game that we had seen at Washington, on top of the fact that you had Jaylen Milroe running the football, and kind of being a guy that you like to get the football quite a bit. What we ended up seeing is not only did Jaylen take away from the running backs quite a bit, but the passing side of things really never came to fruition to the extent that we were expecting. There were still very limited, passing attempts. And so we were talking about all these weapons in the passing game. And it's like, okay, well, if you're getting this three-headed monster and Milroe, Haynes, and Miller all going on the ground, your chances of being able to feed all these different weapons in the passing game really that's limited. And so we saw that on top of the fact that you really didn't get the what you were looking for out of the traditional run game this year. So then everything started being funneled through Jaylen Milroe, mostly through Jaylen Milroe's legs and what they would try to do as far as, play action off of that, do some things as far as setting up different looks for Jaylen in the passing game and stuff. But he vultured a lot from not only the passing game, but also the run game as well. And it's like, that's fun when, the defense doesn't have the ability to stop that. He can be dynamic. He can be fun to watch. He can be really a really tough player to stop if you're a defender. But then you run into certain teams, at least 2 or 3 or 4 on your schedule that are going to have the ability to stop what he does well as a quarterback. And there was no change of pace. There was no, what do they call it? An off pitch in baseball.
Yeah.
He didn't really have that. So, I mean, it was, and that I think is where Alabama really struggled offensively. Kalen DeBoer wants to be able to, no matter what a defense presents, he wants to be able to throw some things at them that are effective and that they can do to where you never run into that situation. And I just think Jaylen being the starting quarterback, as much as I love him, as much as I respect what he's done, I think those limitations are always going to hold Alabama back. And against the right defenses, they're always going to struggle.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about just kind of as we get towards the end of the show, some of the guys that have visited. Kelby Collins, we kind of talked about that. Florida defensive lineman, edge guy. He is kind of sought after, I'm sure, by us, his favorite team growing up, Texas A&M. What do you think about him? I mean, is he a guy that you feel confident about? Maybe we get. I'm sure the pitch with Freddie Roach would have been pretty good, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's familiar with Freddie Roach. He's familiar with Alabama. He is an in-state guy. And I think from a schematic standpoint, like his freshman year at Florida, a lot more, edge. He was playing out there on the edge. They were doing some different things with him. He play, like I said, a 5-tech, a 4-eye on the inside shoulder of the tackle. Every once in a while you see him playing maybe a 3-tech. But then really his second year and watching him on tape, I went back and watched, you could tell he was still learning the game. He was still becoming more confident because he was a better athlete than he was showing, in my opinion. But I think he was second guessing himself and he wasn't really overly confident in what he was doing. And then this year, I guess, they decided to move him inside and make him more of a defensive lineman rather than an edge. And he was playing a lot faster. I think he was a lot more comfortable with what he was doing. But I think that just came with experience and age. So I would have loved to have seen the way that he was confident in his role and how he had kind of grown within Florida's, program. I would have loved to have seen what he could have continued to do if you would have left him out there on the edge and maybe made him a guy that you move inside some. He didn't get that opportunity. They had some other edges that they wanted to play more. But and I think he's not a guy you want him playing inside very situationally. And I think he could provide some pass rush, some interior pass rush if you want to do that with him. Alabama doesn't do that a ton as far as its bandits to kind of leave them as a true 3-down edge. But in Alabama's defense playing that bandit position, he would get to go back out there to kind of playing an end. He'd be playing in a 2-point stance. He'd be playing in a 3-point stance. He'd still be playing a 5 or a 4, a 4-eye, really 4-eye for the most part would probably be the furthest inside that you would see him playing, as far as manning that bandit position. And I think he could do pretty well with that. So I would love to see what he would look like or do in this Kane Womack defense. And I think he has a lot of interest in coming to Alabama. But, at the same time, you don't want to ever make assumptions with these transfer portal guys. He's another one they brought in. They brought him in early. They wanted to talk to him, see where he stood. And, I think Kelby is looking at some different things, and I think Alabama's looking at some different things too. So I wouldn't call it a done deal by any means, but I do think that's probably the one that you should feel most confident in if you're an Alabama fan.
On3 says that 6'5", 330-pound offensive lineman, former Washington offensive lineman, Cauley Tafai is going, I think I said that right, is going to visit Alabama. Bama could certainly use some help on the offensive line. I love and I can tell by the name that is Samoan that spent time in Hawaii, played rugby with guys that were Samoan. Lots of my friends were, out there, were of that culture. They're tough. They're fun. There's just something cool about it. We've had other Samoan guys on the football team, right? To'o being one of them. It's just so cool. Like, and they got the dance and everything that they do. I love the idea of kind of branching out a little bit like that. But I mean, have you heard anything on this?
Well, I mean, he's a guy who has played at Washington the last couple of years, didn't play under Kalen DeBoer, but Kalen DeBoer brought him in. Played more this year, I think, just under 300 snaps. I think he got like 4 starts. USC, Penn State, UCLA, Oregon. So he started against some pretty big teams. Now, obviously, Washington wasn't nearly as effective this year. Either 6-6 or 7-5. I don't remember their final record, but they, he was a guy who got some playing time. He's more of an interior player. He has played tackle for Washington, but being 6'5", 330, especially in Kalen DeBoer's system, you're probably. I think if you needed him to play tackle, we probably couldn't. In an emergency, I guess, but really as an interior guy, and more, in my opinion, as an interior depth piece. Like with Geno Vandermark, I would kind of compare it to that in a way, even though Vandermark had been, he had played a little bit more as far as snaps, but he had limited, I want to say roughly under double-digit starts in his career, but I think he had spent an extra season on the college level, so he was a little bit more developed. But he was kind of a guy who was like, okay, could he end up being a starter? Could he work his way into being a starter? Maybe. But he's got some versatility, can play center, can play guard. And so you liked that. And he ended up being a pretty valuable piece for Alabama this year. With Jaden Roberts not being 100%, he played, right guard at one point. Tyler Booker was out. He played left guard, started at left guard. He played center in some mop-up duty. So he ended up being that versatile piece, and he'll end up competing for a starting job next year, depending on what happens with Jaden Roberts and, Tyler Booker. But, a guy like, Tafi or Tafi, or however you say it, I apologize for botching his name. Eventually I'll hear someone else say it and they'll stick at that point. Mm-hmm. But he's a guy who I think you bring in for depth purposes. But if it's kind of like it's not quite Deshaun Jones from last year, but Deshaun's like, okay, you bring in more experience. And if some of those young guys aren't ready to go, like a Xavier Brown or a Jalen Mbakwe, you can fall back on a guy who's got college experience. So, maybe the ceiling's not quite there compared to others, but he's going to be a steady player. This is kind of a similar situation in the sense of, okay, if you're having to replace Tyler Booker at left guard, maybe some of those young guys that you're bringing in or maybe brought in this year that were freshmen, they're going to be redshirt freshmen, or Michael Carroll being a true freshman. If some of those guys end up not being ready, it's like, okay, we have kind of an experienced option that we can slide in there where you can kind of not have to, panic or whatever. You can have more experience versus talent as far as that competition. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, I wouldn't say, he's anything to write home about, but I think he's a good player and certainly would be quality depth for Alabama.
We're so early in the transfer portal too. I mean, like it's like, this is like the beginning of what's going to be something that'll go on throughout the entire offseason. I feel like, at least it did last year. And then the other thing, Clint, is it's not like Bama has a bunch of open roster spots either. I mean, when you're talking about them needing to shave some guys off already after the signing class, but you're going to lose some guys to the NFL. You'll lose Milroe, you'll lose Booker. Maybe LT Overton would be a guy. I'm guessing he goes, right. He's
Jahad
Campbell for sure, right? And those are the 4 that you're kind of thinking of right off the bat, or am I missing somebody?
Let's see. German Bernard would be one where it's like, does he, doesn't he? But I think that he comes back. You just don't want to see that. Jam Miller is another one. It's like, I think he's coming back, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, as far as, I would say Tyler Booker and Jahad Campbell are the both. It's like, okay, I'm almost for sure they're probably leaving. Mm-hmm. And then Jaylen Milroe, it's like, I'm as confident as I could be that he's leaving one way or another. So then after that, you start to wonder, Keon Sabb was one of those players, but then he gets hurt. Deontay Lawson was one of those players, but then he gets hurt. It's possible Lawson could still come out, but we don't really know what his injury is. Mm-hmm. Even if he did come back, we don't know what that injury is. So it could end up playing in the next year where it's more of just he's still on the roster, still on the team, but it's more of a rehab type of situation. Maybe he ends up coming back at some point next year, or it's not really that serious and he'd be back for the spring. I honestly do not know at this point, but that would be another one to keep an eye on for sure. And you're 100% correct. At one point, I forgot that the SEC had kind of kept the roll at 85 for this year for 2025. And so I was assuming, okay, everybody's going to see the number of scholarship players increase, and you really don't have to worry about scholarship limits. The fact that you're still worried about that 85, that certainly impacts things. And if you're sitting at 85, 86, like Alabama is right now, you end up losing 4 or 5 guys early to the NFL. Maybe you have some more transfer portal guys after the bowl game. You can open up some roster spots, but there for a while I thought, okay, I wouldn't be shocked at all if they kind of took the approach of last year where it was like 13 or 14. But once you realize that they are still limited to that 85, it's like, okay, more than likely you're getting 5 or 6 or 7, transfer portal players. And that's why I think Alabama's being a little bit more selective right now. And I think that they're more so looking for specific needs. And Kalen DeBoer's offense and what it offers, like, I don't think people realize like how valuable Parker Brailsford is as far as what he can do, as far as being an athlete and being able to pull as a center on top of snapping. That feels a very specific void in Kalen DeBoer's system where you can be more versatile with your offensive line through his ability. You look at like the guy like I was talking about with Cody Hardy. I think he would provide a lot of versatility for your offense if you were able to secure a guy like that on top of having just the standard blocking ability. But it's like I think they're more so looking for that style of player where it's like, okay, what are we going to be able to do based off of having this guy? And I think that that's something to keep an eye on as whether it be Mario Craver being a guy who can kind of win vertically right now, but also has the ability to really develop as far as becoming more of a complete receiver or, offensive line or whatever, specific roles I think are going to be filled. And I think whether they're star players or role players, I think Kalen DeBoer and company, I feel confident that they're going to get exactly who they need to help this Alabama team in 2025.
All right, I'm going to throw Buck up here. You tell me what you think. He said the biggest issue on defense. We don't have a game changer on the defensive line. I think Overton was the game changer, but there were games this year, and I agree with Buck, where I just felt like we're waiting for someone to step up and make a big play, and it just didn't happen.
It really, yeah. And, Overton, if he could learn to finish more consistently, I think he's got game-wrecking ability. I am curious to go back and kind of watch his season as a whole, specifically focus on him. And just early on in the season, I'm very, very disruptive. And he continued to be really good from what I remember and watching it just on a week in, week out basis. But going back and watching the season collectively back to back to back, I'll be curious to know what I learned about him as far as did he kind of did he take the foot off the gas a little bit? Did he kind of falter a little bit down the stretch? Some of those things. I think he was the closest thing Alabama had to a game wrecker. I think they had a lot of good defensive linemen. When you look at, Tim Keenan, really good. Tim Smith, really good. Damon Payne, great rotational piece. James Smith is showing flashes. I think he could end up being that impact player maybe in 2025. But when you look at kind of the unit as a whole, and then you start looking at, okay, who are the guys that were just an absolute headache for opposing offensive coordinators? And there's really none that stand out right now. And so I would agree with that statement. But I also think that they have some players who can develop into that type of player. At some point, whether it be, in 2025 or 2026.
Let's hope so. Here's one, Jim. I'm glad you brought this up because I'm hearing some buzz about this too. That the Seahawks are 8-5 and they're tied for first. But for some reason, Clint, I keep hearing people mentioning that there's a chance that Grubb could reunite with DeBoer. And part of it is that maybe, his personality doesn't work as well in college as it does. It doesn't work as well in the NFL as in college. I don't know if that's true or not. Don't quote me on saying, hey, the guy's coming. But Grubb and DeBoer were like Batman and Robin. And I'm sure it certainly hurt the offense this year not having Grubb there calling the plays because him and DeBoer kind of went up through, and then obviously Grubb was going to be the offensive coordinator and then went to Seattle. So would you fire your offensive coordinator if you made the playoffs and you were 8-5 and you won a division? And or would he say, hey, man, I don't really like doing this. I'd rather work with the kids. Could Bama get Grubb? And that could be a game changer. If you get back, you get back to Robin, the Batman. We got Batman. But you know what? Gotham needed we needed the sidekick this year, right?
Yes. First of all, I don't think Geno Smith is that good. I understand he kind of had a career resurgence, right. Got better. Yeah, just even when he had that really good year, well, it might have been the year before last, or maybe it was last year, but I want to say it was 2 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, either way, I don't feel like I've never really believed that he was like a true game-changing franchise quarterback. I think he was just like a guy who could get you by and be steady and solid when you needed him to. So I think he's kind of limited things in Seattle. I really like some of the play designs and stuff from what I've seen, which the Seahawks are, I don't know what it is about them. I love watching them back when Sean Alexander was with them growing up. But for some other reason, I don't know if it's the new jerseys or what, but when I see them on TV, I have no interest in watching them. Now I have when, there's really been nothing else on, but, just kind of, I've loved some of the play designs that I've seen. I think that it can work on the NFL level. They make the playoffs. It would be kind of shocking unless the offense was just disastrous for them to fire Ryan Grubb. Like I've seen that a bunch. I don't know that I agree with it. If he comes available, I think you got to look at it. But at the same time, Nick Sheridan, he became the offense coordinator really late in this process, and he did have the spring that it's like he hadn't done it in 5 years, half a decade. He's trying to figure out, you've got all these changes with personnel compared to what you had and how you did things at Washington. So you had Kalen DeBoer really trying to figure out, okay, Milroe is not Penix. They're two very different players, different types of receivers. Offensive line looks different. Might need to try to run the football a little bit more. It's the SEC. How are we going to play this more complementary style as far as offense and defense? On top of the fact that you got Nick Sheridan, who had not been a play caller in several years, on top of the fact that he's also making this transition. And so they're trying to figure this stuff out together kind of on the fly. And maybe the product didn't look all that great, but I will continue to reiterate, Jaylen Milroe is a very, very different quarterback than, what you're going to see 99 out of 100 times as an offense coordinator. So I still don't know if we know what Nick Sheridan is as a play caller. We just know that the product is kind of underwhelming or mediocre when you have a certain style of quarterback. And maybe, it'll look different moving forward. I don't know if Ryan Grubb will come, is my point. I don't know if he will be fired, but I also think that if they end up sticking with Nick Sheridan, which I don't know if they will or won't, I don't think anybody should be down on Sheridan. You can have your questions about it and maybe be a little bit reserved. You don't have to give him your full support, but I just think people need to give him another chance and just see. And then if it's like you get a different style of quarterback, you get more of the Kalen DeBoer offense that he envisioned when he came over from Washington, and it still just doesn't look great from a play calling perspective on Saturdays, then I'll more so start to understand people's gripes.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. You know what? I think this could happen, but because look, Clint, if I go work at, you work at On3 and I work here or Rivals or whatever, we're always talking. Now, maybe not a lot, but we're always talking. And when we have a colleague that works for one of our competitors, we know if he's not real happy. And we may be just keeping an eye going, hey, you know what? If this guy gets to the point where he's tired of putting up with the BS that they have at that place, he can come over here and hang out on this team and have a good time every day, right? You know what I mean? And that could be the situation. But people talk. And it's not like you worked with this guy. You guys were a great team. And then he goes to the NFL and you don't know what's going on. So I just feel like the fact that it's been out there so much tells me that there's a possibility. It could also be what we call a curveball in this business. And that is, hey, I'm not real happy with some of the stuff going on behind the scenes in Seattle. And if these guys don't get off of my case, I'm going back to college. It's called leverage, right? And maybe I'm just using this as I can always go back with my man DeBoer. We're like brothers. I can go back there. You guys don't like 8-5? You don't like being in the playoffs? Not good enough for you? Okay, I'm leaving. There's the problem is this. When it comes to working with some companies, and some of you guys probably know what I'm talking about at home, and this has nothing to do with like broadcasting or shows or whatever, but you work at some places, the reputation's great, right? And then you get there and somebody's just in your ass all the time. You just constantly got to, somebody's always over your shoulder, always has a problem. Things aren't as good as they look from the outside, right? And I'm sure that there's places in the NFL like that. Somebody's getting micromanaged. Somebody's getting questioned every time they do something. Hey, we only had a 250-yard game. Yeah, but you know what? I got Geno Smith as my quarterback. I don't know if you guys recognize the fact that he's not that good, but he's not that good. He's okay. He's okay. And your whole offense works on that. But is somebody riding him on that? Somebody questioned him. And, man, you know what? Third down, he threw a pass, 3rd and 2. We should have just ran it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I'm pretty sure Geno Smith got hurt yesterday.
What's that?
I'm pretty sure Geno Smith got hurt yesterday too. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, I didn't watch a lot of that game.
I don't know, but you know what I'm saying, though.
Oh yeah. I'm right there with you.
You worked at a place like that before?
Oh, yeah.
You never know who your boss is. Like every time you turn around, there's another guy that's my boss. Well, he's telling me something that this other guy did tell me. What?
And one thing you are going to get from Kalen DeBoer is he is not that type of guy.
No.
He's going to work with you.
Yep.
You're going to feel like you have a support system. He's going to give you ideas. You're going to be more of a brain trust, but he's not going to micromanage you. He's not going to be, I will say, he's the greatest of all time, but Nick Saban was a micromanager.
Yeah,
he's going to, now granted, I think him kind of giving the keys to Lane Kiffin in a lot of ways when he came and said, you know what, I'm going to let you do your thing. I'll be here as a resource. They did figure a lot of that stuff out together.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to actually calling the plays and stuff, I think he had that trust with Steve Sarkisian too. And those aren't the only two guys, but I think at a lot of times when things start struggling, he starts trying to help get things fixed. And I think he could have been a really good offensive minded head coach too, if he really wanted to be. I think he understood the offense extremely well. So he was kind of more of a micromanager than Kalen DeBoer from what I know of both parties.
If Lane Kiffin could have stayed out of the bars, think about how good he was already. And I've heard him talk about not being not drinking anymore.
Are you seeing these
thing for him because his reputation in Tuscaloosa, and they have videos of, every bar in town now, and they did back then, so good for him because he was that successful with that big of a problem.
Are you saying he's the Josh Gordon of
I'm just telling you,
football coach? Because Josh Gordon was was legendary when he played receiver for the Cleveland Browns. That cat was incredible, but that dude stayed high, and it was like maybe that's what helps make him incredible. Or maybe he could be the greatest receiver of all time if he wasn't smoking all the time. That guy couldn't. But I guess you're saying Lane Kiffin, as great as he has been, and I agree with you, he's great. You're saying he could have been even better.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure that's, he's kind of talked about that. I'm not a big fan of his because of his antics in Tuscaloosa, but I respect the talent, man. How about the guy going to having half of the Arkansas team all come over there and transfer? Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. I should say Joey Freshwater, AKA Joey Freshwater. I was there during those days. So I guess that's like kind of why I'm always like, you can't hire this guy to be your head coach. Maybe one day though. You know what? He's actually good for him, man. They should have been in the college football playoff over some of these scrub teams that made it. I look at Ole Miss, I look at Bama, South Carolina. Chris Mahler would be proud of me for saying that. I'd even put Miami in over, some of these like Arizona States and SMU. Give me a break, man. But yeah, and we didn't get the Haas guy or Haz or whatever his name is. But I heard, and I don't know if you heard this too, and I don't know if it was just a rumor or not, but there were like 8 guys hanging out at Ole Miss that were transferring from Arkansas. They were going to try to all go to Ole Miss. And I was thinking to myself, like, is that really what you want? You just want to go get the guys off the Arkansas team? I'll just bring the Arkansas team over because we saw that the Marshall team all went to, or they're all going to Southern Miss, right? Is that the way we do things now?
I don't know. It's like I said, what people's got to understand is like this is Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss's Tom Bashan, because this is what they really put their effort and energy towards the most. They still want to recruit high school. They want to get those guys in, but the transfer portal is just an easier process. If you save all your money, you really don't spend it too much on the high school level. You get, Caleb Cunningham, you throw some money his way, he's got an incredible upside long-term. But you look at where they finished. I don't even know where it was. I want to say in like the mid-teens. You save yourself some money on that front, but then you really start hammering the transfer portal because for most guys in the transfer portal, you're not selling mom and dad. You're not selling, you're selling 2 things. What are we giving you and what can we do from a playing time perspective to help you get to the next level? And so, everybody's kind of questioned Lane Kiffin's willingness or want to recruit. Way easier to do. Like, Hugh Freeze was talking last year about how much of a struggle it was. Like, he wants to get in front of these players. He wants to be able to pitch them and sell them. He's always viewed himself as a really good recruiter and could build relationships. And it's like he figured out real quick, these guys are committing somewhere before you can even get an opportunity to get them on campus and sell them on any sort of vision. This year, He's doing his best to kind of overcome that. He's maybe approaching things a little bit differently. You see guys getting offers before they even get to Auburn's campus. My point is that I think Alabama's in a position with its roster, with the fact they finished really strong on the recruiting trail as far as being number 2 overall, and they have enough coming back next year where there was a lot of youth in this Alabama locker room where they could be a little bit more selective on who they target in the transfer portal. And I think you want the big, like, it's kind of like free agency compared to the draft on the NFL level. And, a lot of your very successful teams, they build through the draft and not free agency. You go and you spend just an absurd amount of money trying to bring in a bunch of free agents. That rarely works out. And so, Ole Miss was good this year. They still fell short of expectations. In fact, they finished worse this year than they did last year from a record standpoint. Yeah. So it's,
they're consistent, though. You got to give them that. I mean,
and they're going to keep. They're going to keep swinging for the fences. I mean, you can see it. They're not laying down at all. But my point is that that there's Alabama. Ole Miss targeted the transfer portal big last year. Alabama really took more of an approach, a complementary approach with the transfer portal, and they finished like in the same range. And so, I mean, it's a different way of doing things.
All right, I'm going to do a couple more before we get out of here. Jim says, Gino. Yeah, we're talking about Gino. No, Jim, this is the one I wanted to talk about right here. Anyone know Derek Meadows 40 time? Does he have speed or just a big receiver? I got my Derek Meadows story is that was interviewing Caleb Cunningham. And he was telling me about his visit to Tuscaloosa. And he kept talking about how much Derek Meadows liked Alabama, which is pretty funny, right? And Meadows, I think at the time, was a Notre Dame commit and then eventually LSU. So when Cunningham left, I wonder if he called and said, hey, man, I'm going to Ole Miss. You need to come to Bama because you loved it so much. That makes me love this guy.
I mean, from what I've heard, low 4.5. So, good. I mean, and great vertical speed. I think that's probably one of his early strong suits. Like, you want that big-bodied X that can go and win downfield. A guy like Derek Meadows can do that. And another thing I want to point out with a guy like Meadows is you have to pitch these high school guys too, right? I mean, certain things, they want the NIL dollars, but they want certain players that are very highly coveted. They want roles as well, or they at least want to see the vision of where they'll have an opportunity. I think it's so important for coaches to keep their promises. Signing day, the early signing period, is before this first transfer portal window. If you go and at the last second you sell Derek Meadows on, hey, we're expecting to lose a few receivers, we see a role for you as far as, within our offense, maybe even early, you got to come in, you got to work hard, but we're going to give you every opportunity to compete. You get him to sign on the dotted line, he trusts you, and then you turn around and go sign, another big time receiver. And now now you got your 3 starters pretty much locked up. And now you've got Jalen Hill coming back, and you got Cole Adams coming back, and you got Rico Scott, who's shown promise. You've got all these other players, Emmanuel Henderson being another one. It's like, really, where's this opportunity going to come from? So what you did is you kind of lied to him just so you can get him to sign the long-term guy, and then you go fill the more immediate. And it's like, okay, if the more you do that, let a player get on campus, and now you got him spending some time with some of your current players. Some of those players will be honest with him and say, hey, I was kind of sold a false bill of goods here when I committed, and I've been sitting here riding the bench all year and haven't had one single opportunity really. So my point is with that is to say, I think Derek Meadows is going to get some opportunities in year one. He's got to take advantage. I'm not saying he's going to be a part of the offense, but I think he fills a specific need. I think Caleb Odom, to some extent, got some opportunities throughout the course of this season, didn't really capitalize. And so, if you do all that, then you go sign a big name player. But if you go out and you sign another guy who fills a very different need, a very specific need within your wide receiver room, that's a little bit different. And so, we'll have to wait and see how it plays.
All right. I love it, man. Love you guys. Thank you for being here with us on Cover Crimson. Check out Clint and Stacy, who I saw is in the house, and Chris Smaller. And then, of course, we've got on the YouTube channel LT and Aaron Suttles on the Bama and Bourbon, and Jake Coker. About Did you see Coker's show on Saturday? That thing was like 10,000 views. So I'm like,
hey,
what happened
stuff
here?
Good topic, good people talking about it. That's a winning combination, man.
I saw that. I was like, okay, maybe you guys are telling us you want more Saturday shows. I was like, all right, we can do that. We got Mike Johnson, Chris Stewart, Kelly Hunter, and we got a lot of great people on here. I'm sure I missed somebody, but thank you guys. Like and subscribe, thumbs up. Thank you for being here and making our channel great. Make sure you share with your Bama friends. And honestly, man, I got to tell you guys, all the comments, I haven't read the comments like I used to read them, partly because when Brett died, I just didn't want to read all. Every time you guys would say, hey, man, it was hard for me to look at it, because it was hard to believe it. So I've gone back and I'm just honestly blown away by the love that you guys throw out there, man. So thank you. And even when we disagree on a topic, it's like, it's still fun, for every, one butthole, there's like a million good people, and that's what makes our audience fantastic. So really from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and keep the comments going, whether it's here or on my channel. And then, it's not what we wanted as far as the way that this thing went down. I think I've made it clear my opinion of the playoff committee and Bama being left out. But you know what? You got to get up the next day and move on. I think this staff's doing a good job of it. We'll be covering it as it happens. So Clint is on covercrimson.com every day doing that. I mean, giving you like really good breakdowns of the guys that are coming in to visit with the portal, the inside information on that, anything recruiting wise. Anything going on to say if Grubb really was an option, we'd have information on there about that too. And we've got some pretty good sources. So join us, covercrimson.com, Clint.
Yeah, I just want to point out this comment. We do know that the Night King got killed by a teenage girl, right? He went out like a witch.
He was up there for a while though.
Yeah, it was real intimidating, and then by the time he actually got there, it was about 20 minutes later. Dude's getting dropped by a 15-year-old, or 14. I don't even know how old she was. But
is that the worst end of a show ever?
Oh, it's let's not do that, man. We'll extend this thing out for about 3 hours. Yeah, it is the absolute, and I've seen some doozies.
Yeah,
at least they tried to. Even though they've been pretty terrible with Dexter, I thought the Dexter ending was pretty terrible. I've seen some bad endings to some shows, but that's by far the worst. Alabama didn't have a dragon glass.
Yeah.
All right.
Some dragon eggs. All right, guys. And again, I want to tell you this too. No, it's not the jelly of the month club. It's better than that. 300% deposit bonus for the casino and 50 free spins using the promo code next round, or 50% sign up bonus for the sports book. MyBookie.ag. Use the promo code next round. Remember, there's our peeps, man. Our people are the gang at the next round. So check it out and take advantage. Thank you for hanging with us. We will do this again. We'll have more shows coming up. Coker's already telling me that he's ready for a big week. Mike Johnson's ready to talk. So we'll get the most out of them, Clint, before it's all said and done. Anything that I left out?
No, great stuff. And happy holidays to everybody too. You got Christmas coming up here in less than 10 days. We'll obviously be doing a lot of shows between now and then. This isn't the last one, but I want to go ahead and wish everybody a happy holidays. Hope everybody stays safe, has a good time, and I hope you don't get coal from Santa.
Yeah, hopefully you get a lava lamp like Clint, or maybe Clint will wrap his up and re-gift it to you.
That was a part of my birthday gift from my wife, and I got to be honest. Every time I was in a store, I'd see a lava lamp, and I'm like, I got to be honest. I'm thinking about getting a lava lamp. I always wanted one when I was a kid. I thought they were awesome. And she ended up getting me one, and I gotta admit, man, it's every bit as cool as I remember when I was a kid. You don't outgrow lava lamps.
No, I had one. And
they're good stuff.
They're great. All right, guys. Thank you. Roll Tide, everybody. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate, however you do it. We'll talk to you again soon.